One choice. There was musical stillness, no spectacular announcement, no press conference, and no meticulously planned interview. And for some reason, the WNBA as a whole was rocked by that quiet. Because at the same moment the league is discussing its financial future, a player suddenly retreats without arguing, defending herself, or even providing an explanation. That isn't arbitrary. Leverage is that. And it has far greater impact than any viral tirade. Many people thought it was just another noisy sports media moment when Stephen A. Smith publicly questioned league leadership and openly questioned how this problem was being handled. However, this wasn't just noise. Headlines. His response felt odd. There was a sense of urgency, as if he realized something more significant was going on behind the scenes, something structural rather than sentimental. The WNBA was seeing its biggest surge to date. Record-breaking TV ratings, sold-out stadia, and a new influx of corporate sponsors. Women's basketball, which is seldom discussed in sports debates, is now at the forefront. It seemed impossible to stop the energy. The league wasn't competing for attention for the first time. It was giving it orders. Everything appeared stable at first glance. Growth seemed to last forever. The innovation seemed whole, yet beneath that joy, something brittle was keeping everything together. The league was not criticized by Caitlin Clark. She didn't make any public accusations. She made no threats to leave. Rather, she took a much more subdued and calculated action. She turned down the next major opportunity that many thought she would take. Just a choice to take a back seat and enjoy her off-season on her own terms, without any drama or animosity. No statement could ever carry the weight that silence did. Just as the WNBA Players Association opted out of its collective negotiations, timing is what made it explosive. Agreement 2 years ahead of schedule, demonstrating assurance and a willingness to bargain from strength. The biggest star in the league demonstrated that she wasn't reliant on the result. The union's action made sense on paper. The momentum was enormous. The number of viewers was increasing. Sponsors made investments. This was the perfect time to advocate for a larger share. However, leverage is only effective when there is a solid foundation beneath it. All of a sudden, the foundation appeared less solid than anyone was willing to acknowledge. For months, the narrative claimed that women's basketball had finally entered a new age based on teamwork, and that the league's rise was natural and evenly distributed. However, a new picture begins to take shape when you truly examine the data patterns, attendance spikes, television figures, and retail tendencies. The distribution of engagement was uneven. Not everyone paid attention. One name was at the core of the gravitational force. Everything is altered by that reality. Because the balance of power instantly alters when the player spearheading the surge shows that she is at ease living outside the storm while talks deepen inside it. Quietly, not loudly, not violently. Stephen A's response was not one of indignation. It has to do with acknowledgement. Understanding that it wasn't only contract drama at the time. Acknowledgement that the league might have misjudged the extent to which a single presence contributed to its recent success. Acknowledgement that the repercussions could be substantially worse than anyone anticipated if the wrong decision is made today. This is not about a single off-season choice. It has to do with exposure. Exposure to potential dependence on growth. Exposure of the brittle momentum that results from one key character opting for distance rather than involvement. Exposure to the rapid transformation of confidence into doubt when leverage is put to the test in real time. Because this is the unsettling realization that permeates both studio sets and boardrooms. Chaos is not necessary for Caitlin Clark to flourish. For the league to expand, stability is necessary. And a person gains the most impact when they demonstrate that they are not ensnared in the system. Everything was altered by a single silent choice. And more than one negotiation could be altered by what happens next. Caitlin Clark was not the originator of the gamble music. It began in a chamber used for negotiations. The WNBA Players Association made a daring move that surprised many casual viewers at the height of what seemed to be unstoppable momentum. They chose to leave their collective bargaining agreement 2 years ahead of schedule. To put it simply, they decided to resume talks prior to the existing agreement expired. It was a measured risk based on assurance. The time made perfect sense from their musical point of view. The league had never witnessed such a rise in attendance. Music internal records were being broken by television ratings. Corporate sponsors were competing as well as being interested. At last, airlines began offering charter flights. Media outlets that had long disregarded the league were beginning to pay notice. For many players, it was evidence that years of activism, sacrifice, and hard work had finally paid off. So why hold off? Why not get a bigger share if growth were picking up speed so quickly? Of the earnings when the spotlight was at its brightest? Why use an older contract that was negotiated prior to this surge? Music from a business perspective, it can be a wise move to strike while visibility is at its highest. Negotiations usually go your way when you have the most leverage. That was the presumption. And it didn't seem absurd at first glance. Music players had been advocating for better benefits, revenue sharing, better travel conditions, and higher compensation for decades. A large portion of that improvement had been excruciatingly sluggish. Therefore, the reasoning probably seemed clear as the figures began to move dramatically. Music, this is our time. However, momentum can be deceptive. Because why the league was expanding was more important than whether it was expanding. Was this growth centered on a particular catalyst, or was it dispersed equally among teams and players? At the time, nobody wanted to acknowledge how important that divide was. Music, the increase was probably seen by the union as systematic evidence that women's basketball had reached a turning point. Renegotiating early would be a show of strength if it were the case. It would be a sign of solidarity, self-assurance, and faith in sustained growth. However, the risk profile completely shifts if the rise was closely linked to one star receiving disproportionate attention. Choosing uncertainty arises from leaving early. It raises the likelihood of labor disputes, delays, or public unrest, even if they are minor. It is possible to absorb the risk in stable circumstances. It can cause everything to become unstable in delicate circumstances. This is the point at which the risk becomes intricate. Because investors, broadcasters, and corporate sponsors react to predictability rather than merely growth. While brand collaborations depend on continuity, television contracts are based on projections. Caution follows the introduction of uncertainty into the equation. Music, the players think they were in a dominant position when negotiating. However, only when all parties are confident that the engine driving the revenue stream will continue to be fully engaged will negotiations be successful. This presumption was going to be put to the test. Timing is what makes this scenario even more precarious. There was no drop in music during the opt-out. It took place amid a celebration. Its impact was enhanced by that contrast. The league added volatility at the same moment investors were recalculating expectations upward, rather than bolstering stability amid a record-breaking rise. From one angle, it was bravery. It was premature, according to another. Because the risk would be controllable if the expansion actually depended on larger cultural momentum. However, labor tension becomes far more dangerous if the surge is largely attributed to one star attracting new viewers. And something unsettling was already suggested by the data. It was an easy wager. The league is greater than any one celebrity. The issue is that markets don't function based on belief. They are based on behavior. Additionally, behavior was revealing a more delicate narrative than anyone wished to publicly express. The data music roared rather than whispered. Analysts attempted to portray the WNBA boom as a widespread cultural revolution for months. Additionally, women's basketball benefited greatly from long overdue attention in numerous ways. However, one tendency becomes unavoidable when you isolate the data, remove the motivational headlines, and focus only on behavior, television viewership, ticket sales, and digital music engagement. Everything went into overdrive as Caitlin Clark performed. Her team's national broadcasts broke previous records for regular season viewership. Suddenly, every seat in arenas that hadn't sold out in years was sold out. Secondary ticket marketplaces experienced a boom. Sales of jerseys surged to levels seldom seen in the league. Social media videos were making the rounds outside of WNBA circles as well. They were going viral on popular sports websites that had not previously given the league much attention. The pattern that completely altered the debate then emerged. Those same measurements declined when she wasn't playing, not gradually, not gently, but drastically. Music when she wasn't there, television viewership, which had doubled or even tripled during her appearances, returned to historical averages. There was an uneven distribution of the spike throughout the calendar. It was remarkably consistent in following a single player. The talent in the league is not diminished by this. It merely draws attention to a reality of the market. The concept of women's basketball wasn't the only reason casual viewers were watching. They were watching an event. And there was a name for that music event. This is not a sentimental dispute. It has to do with math. Ratings are examined minute by network officials. Sponsors research trends and engagement. Music conversion spikes are measured by advertisers. They don't use stories to function. They are proof-based. Additionally, the evidence demonstrated a gravitational attraction that was unique to the league and centered around a single athlete. Road games even turned into spectacles. When her squad visited, opposing arenas updated their seating arrangements. Music to meet demand, cities relocated games to bigger venues. When she was added to the program, teams that usually functioned in regulated, low-attendance settings suddenly found themselves in the public eye. Economic discussions are reshaped by such an impact since it raises a fundamental question. Is the growth catalytic or systemic? Collective bargaining leverage naturally rises if growth is systemic, that is, uniformly distributed and fundamentally integrated throughout the league. However, stability greatly depends on the catalyst's continued activity and engagement if growth is catalytic, spurred by a single factor attracting new consumers into the ecosystem. This is the point at which it starts to feel awkward. Music, the numbers were disproportionate in addition to being powerful. Contracts for television frequently depend on anticipated rising paths. Based on expected audience stability, advertisers make commitments. Any uncertainty about a star is increased when estimates are based on the star's continuous participation. It doesn't affect investors emotionally. They are critical thinkers. Because of this, Stephen A. Smith's commentary struck a chord that went beyond amusement. He wasn't debating personalities. He was talking about economics. Not only does the Clark music impact increase curiosity, but it also expectations changed as a result. The league battled to broaden its influence for years. The door was then abruptly kicked open. There were new fans in the room. Casual. Viewers turned into attentive observers. The league started to take center stage in daily discussions in media cycles that had previously ignored it. Seldom does that kind of expansion occur uniformly across several stars at once. It frequently centers on a single transcendent figure who changes how the entire sport is perceived. And the financial balance adjusts to reflect that change. The accomplishments of other players are not diminished by this. Music, although markets encourage momentum, and momentum flowed in a very particular direction, it doesn't lessen their accomplishments or legacy. Therefore, executives, sponsors, and analysts weren't posing philosophical queries when negotiations heated up and labor uncertainty emerged. They were posing practical questions. If the player who is driving these spikes moves away, what will happen? What would happen if fans followed her somewhere else? What happens if the one force driving expansion collides with the instability induced during negotiations? These are not dramatic questions. They are structural. Because leverage changes subtly but significantly once data reveals dependency. And that insight sets the setting for the most calculated action of all. Then came the move that no one could adequately describe since it didn't appear to be a move at all. The league's assumption was nearly automatic as word spread about the new off-season 3-on-3 endeavor that was unparalleled. Caitlin Clark would be involved, of course. The financial structure that was rumored was appealing. Opportunities for equity were reportedly available. Veteran celebrities were openly supporting it. On paper, it appeared to be the logical next move for the most talked-about female basketball player. However, she refused. No bold declaration, no critique of the enterprise, and no public disassociation from nobody is involved. It's just a discreet choice to take it easy and enjoy her off-season as she sees fit. The conjecture erupted at that point. There were rumors that the offer was big. According to some accounts, the league was created with the hope that her involvement would instantly increase its debut. One thing was evident regardless of the accuracy of all the numbers that were circulating online. Her appearance would have ensured immediate media attention. She continued to refuse. That's restraint in the corporate world. That's power in terms of leverage. Because by refusing to commit to the next major endeavor, particularly during a time of group, she positioned herself outside the cycle of pressure by negotiating uncertainty. She left the immediate arena without causing any trouble, even while talks swirled, disputes heated up, and media commentary intensified. There was weight to that absence. Music the Story would have focused on growth and opportunity if she had joined unrivaled. The story changed to one of independence by taking a step back. Analysts stopped asking what she was building all of a sudden. They wanted to know what she might be avoiding. And the tone of that question shifts. Leaving something and demonstrating that you don't need it immediately are two different things. The latter is more eerie and quiet. The choice was presented by several media outlets as straightforward off-season management. Some saw it as a calculated halt. Some conjectured that it was a signal to both the union and the league. Music, it's crucial to remember that no public accusation or confirmation backs up those more serious interpretations, but in negotiation environments, perception is crucial. And perception started to change rapidly as timing once again magnified the message. This calendar choice wasn't made at random. It occurred during a time when players were using collective leverage and labor talks were at an all-time high. Rather than moving farther into the environment, she showed that she could move sideways instead of forward. Additionally, optionality in economics is equivalent to power. Music, she already had the exposure she desired. She already had endorsement deals if she wanted them. Regardless of whether she participated in the off-season or not, she could still achieve worldwide recognition. As a result, the debate shifted from one of opportunity to one of posture. It wasn't called a rebellion by Stephen A. Smith. He didn't refer to it as retiring. He characterized it as a more subdued signal. Whether deliberate or not, the impact was indisputable. The league's most lucrative attraction had recently demonstrated that she could withdraw from further endeavors without becoming obsolete. Actually, more conversation was sparked by her absence than by her involvement. Influence is that. Additionally, it caused a subtle conflict within the larger ecology. Traditional leverage dynamics can no longer function in the same way if one person may make news by withdrawing rather than intervening. There was only distance, no obvious divisions, no public threats. However, remoteness can be more powerful than alignment in high-level negotiations. Music suddenly, investors, media figures, union leaders, and executives were all responding to something that, in theory, never made a sound. The emphasis then moved upward music. Because attention eventually shifted to leadership as labor talks became more intense and star leverage became apparent. At that point, the temperature increased. Already, Commissioner Kathy Angel-Burt was managing one of the trickiest situations in league history. Opportunities come with record growth, but scrutiny also follows. Music, every choice is amplified. Every comment is examined. In contrast to quieter seasons, every mistake feels magnified. All of a sudden, music critique was no longer confined to private spaces. Prominent media personalities started asking whether the league was managing this surge appropriately. Stephen A. Smith discussed more than just ratings. He questioned the accountability of leaders. It's not standard sports talk when national pundits begin debating whether a commissioner is capable of handling a situation like this. This suggests that there is perceived instability at the top. Reports of conflict between players and league officials increase the tension. According to online conversations, some remarks were seen as condescending or out of touch. It's crucial to note that a lot of this discussion has been influenced by secondhand recollections and media interpretation. However, the sense of music can be equally potent as verification. And attitudes began to shift in the direction of disconnection. Music, when player leadership expresses dissatisfaction in public, even in subtle ways, it has a cascading impact. Music stability at the top enters the financial discourse, and investors, broadcasters, and corporate sponsors take notice. Because this is the unsettling fact of fast expansion. Leadership needs to change as quickly as the spotlight. The WNBA operated in a controlled media environment for many years. there wasn't much coverage. Cycles of pressure were contained. Without national daily debate shows analyzing every viewpoint, negotiations took place. Music, the dynamic shifted. Nearly overnight. Every action now takes place under a microscope. It makes headlines if athletes feel underappreciated. The commissioner will be criticized if they try to strike a balance between expansion and financial conservatism. The story swiftly turns into crisis language if talks break down. Additionally, narrative music is important during a bargaining window. Managing growth in secret is not the same as managing growth under constant scrutiny from national media figures. The latter calls for almost flawless messaging. Any indication of an interior fracture is magnified as proof of more serious structural issues. There were rumors that alignment was not as strong as public declarations suggested between player leadership and league executives. Music once more, there was no official confirmation that any of this was a systemic collapse, but strain may influence perception without confirmation. Leverage is also influenced by perception, because sponsors and broadcasters assess climate in addition to statistics. They examine the cohesiveness of leadership. They evaluate danger. Confidence stays constant if a league seems cohesive during talks. Uncertainty creeps in music if cracks show up in public. The tension was not heightened by Stephen A's remarks. The music was a reflection of its presence. The willingness to challenge the commissioner's handling of the matter indicated that dissatisfaction was not confined to internet discussion forums. It was now widely analyzed. Everything was made worse by the time of the music. As collective bargaining talks heated up and the league's biggest star showed independence, leadership scrutiny fell. A dangerous triangle is created by the trifecta of labor negotiations, star leverage, and leadership criticism. That combination is not welcomed by any organization. Because everything else becomes less steady once confidence and leadership are discussed, sponsors get wary, music analysts become doubtful, fans become interested in what goes on behind the scenes, and the league's most prized commodity during its ascent, stability, felt negotiable all of a sudden. The commissioner was no longer merely overseeing growth. She was controlling her sense of control. And perception frequently turns into reality in situations like these. A much larger factor, music, lurked in the background while everyone concentrated on domestic negotiations and media disputes. Almost no one wanted to talk about it publicly. Caitlin Clark is becoming more than simply a national attraction. She is a worldwide celebrity. Basketball is a global industry. Music-aggressive salary structures are used by European clubs. Exhibition circuits move from one city to another throughout continents. Music due to income splits and salary caps, international sponsors frequently operate more quickly and pay differently than domestic leagues. Additionally, geography ceases to be a constraint and completely alters the leverage equation if a player achieves transcendent prominence. There have been more and more discussions about her earning potential outside of the conventional WNBA framework, most of which are speculative but persistent. Top female players have traditionally received much higher earnings in foreign leagues than in local ones. The figures soon rise when you include appearance fees, global endorsement activations, and brief overseas tours. Imagine now that the earning potential linked to someone in the sport who is now receiving the most attention. The very fact that she has the opportunity to leave changes every negotiating dynamic music, even if she never gives it much thought. This is because leverage increases when there are realistic alternatives. Urgency would shift inward if the league were her only source of income or relevance. However, waiting is made easier when doors to the world are open. During televised debates, that is the aspect that is hardly acknowledged. Basketball markets actively seek talent in regions such as Spain, Turkey, Australia, and some parts of Asia. The same long-term development plans and pay scales that apply to local leagues do not apply to international promoters. They assess marketability in different ways. Her participation in a brief international exhibition tour could garner media interest for far longer than a single season. Once more, none of this proves intent. There is no concrete evidence that she intends to leave the WNBA. However, markets react to more than just confirmed activities. They react to opportunities. And leverage is equal to possibility music. She could create a targeted global presence that protects her brand and maximizes profits if she so desired. She could organize touring exhibitions. She may independently collaborate with international sponsors. Music, she might collaborate with media outlets outside of the leagues. Ecosystem. Could is the crucial word. Because the WNBA is no longer negotiating inside a closed framework, that option alone quietly changes power. It's bargaining in an international sports market. Furthermore, transcendent athletes are rarely confined to a single structure in that marketplace unless the structure provides them with strong incentives to stay. Fan loyalty is what gives this dynamic even more potency. These days, fans of sports aren't just loyal to teams. They identify with certain personalities. Many of the new followers she attracted to women's basketball would probably follow her if she were to take the stage internationally. It's useful to have that portability. The WNBA did not have to contend with significant foreign competition for its most well-known American players for many years. International audiences can now interact with alternative platforms with ease thanks to global digital distribution. Boundaries are erased via social media. Geographical restrictions are eliminated by streaming, and investors recognize that the existence of an escape route, even one that is never used, turns talks from demands into calculations. A league negotiates differently if it believes that allegiance must be continuously reinforced during times of growth, as opposed to assuming long-term commitment under all circumstances. It becomes equally crucial to maintain the central figure's engagement as it is to expand infrastructure. Thus, a more subdued question lingered beneath the surface as headlines focused on leadership conflict and labor strategy. What would happen if the players spearheading the surge discovered that her potential goes much beyond a single league? The existence of that question is strong in and of itself, even though it may never need to be tested. The matter becomes brutally straightforward when the emotion, allegiance, and headlines are removed. Right now, who truly needs who more? The WNBA ran on a fundamental principle for many years. The league is greater than any one person. From a historical perspective, that philosophy makes sense. Sports organizations that are sustainable cannot rely solely on just one star. To ensure that the brand endures beyond a single career, they create processes, rivalries, traditions, and depth. However, philosophy is irrelevant to markets. Demand affects markets. Additionally, demand has been remarkably focused. It wasn't out of kindness that television networks abruptly renegotiated interest. It wasn't just long-term hope that attracted sponsors. Because of abstract possibilities, advertisers did not significantly expand exposure. Music, they reacted to quantifiable increases in customer behavior. Caitlin Clark-related games produced those surges. Her broadcast windows routinely fared better than others. Metrics for engagement weren't equally dispersed. They gathered together. Negotiation authority is complicated by this reality. It was assumed that the league required labor unity to sustain momentum after the Players Association pulled out of the deal early. And in a vacuum, that is accurate. Athletes are essential to the operation of any league. However, the equally important reality is that not every league's economic benefit is distributed equitably. Leverage becomes unequal if one person is disproportionately driving revenue acceleration. The significance of collective bargaining is not diminished by this. It draws attention to economic structure. Pressure points are the foundation of negotiation strategy. A work stoppage or interruption is the union's traditional point of pressure. However, the calculation shifts if disruption has a greater impact on the main source of income than it does on ownership. Based on anticipated expansion, broadcasters have made investments. Marketing initiatives have been coordinated by corporate sponsors to capitalize on the present boom. These revenue streams don't just stop indefinitely if games are canceled or postponed or lose value as a result of instability. Contingencies are part of contracts. Music payments are frequently contingent upon product delivery. The awkward math comes up now. Music, if viewership declines in the absence of her involvement, and revenue-sharing percentages only matter when there is revenue to split, the revenue pool diminishes, and unpredictability deters casual fans from coming back. The leverage paradox is that Music the Players Association felt that time increased their influence, although timing is only effective when growth is robust. Volatility becomes costly if growth is personality-driven and brittle. From the outside, it can seem like labor and management are engaged in a power war. But there's a deeper question underneath that layer. Without the one musician who sparked it, is the current boom in music sustainable? If the response is negative, even in part, then there is dependency, and vulnerability is created by dependency music. Caitlin Clark's musical impact can be exerted without public confrontation. Numbers prove her worth. She can change the tone of the negotiation without making spectacular remarks. It is sufficient to only preserve optionality. In the meantime, the league must solve a more difficult problem. It must strike a compromise between the immediate economic realities of a star-driven rise and long-term structural equity for all players. Resentment increases if the group is ignored. Revenue stalls if you ignore the catalyst. Music when both sides feel justified, that delicate balancing act becomes almost impossible. Who then requires whom? For the league to work, its players must work together. The league serves as a structured platform for the players. However, the league's current expansion story seems particularly linked to the involvement of a single athlete. This implies that there is very little room for error, because growth is likely to continue if she stays involved. Music there would be an instantaneous knock-on impact if she disengages even slightly. It has nothing to do with ego. It has to do with economics. Furthermore, denial is rarely rewarded in economics. Ultimately, there was no spectacular walkout, no stunning statement, and no headline that announced a turning point. Nevertheless, a pivotal moment occurred. The overall circumstance did not change as a result of a speech or a protest. Positioning caused it to move. The Players Association took a risk because they thought the league's growth would give them the most clout. Under severe scrutiny, leadership attempted to control fast development. Music the tension was heightened by media figures. Investors kept a tight eye on things. Music online, fans quarreled. But it wasn't a loud response that had the most impact. It was silent. There was no danger of departure from Caitlin Clark. The commissioner was not attacked by her. She didn't openly support one group over another. She merely showed that her influence doesn't require ongoing involvement. She demonstrated that she could remain the conversation's gravitational center while stepping back, turning down opportunities and avoiding the commotion. The power shift is that. Because yelling demands isn't what constitutes actual leverage. It's about demonstrating your options. The WNBA battled to establish stability for years. It is now visible. Music, however, visibility modifies the regulations. Making decisions gets more difficult whenever growth is linked to a single driver. The stakes are higher in every negotiation. Every statement made by a leader is magnified. Every absence is observed. What causes there is no conflict at this historic moment. Exposure is what it is. Exposing the potential dependence of the current surge. Exposure to the sensation of fragile motion in the presence of uncertainty. Exposure of how one player can music affect boardroom dynamics just by existing outside of the pressure cycle without using words. Nobody likes to exaggerate this fact, but it's also impossible to ignore. The league will probably continue to rise if she remains completely committed. There will be immediate economic repercussions if she decides to keep her distance if the unrest worsens. Not because the sport is shallow or the league is lacking in talent, but rather because new fans frequently become adopting ecosystems come second after. Transformative personalities. This does not imply that collapse is unavoidable. It implies that making mistakes in calculations might be harmful. The most profound effects are frequently left by the quietest actions. For a day, headlines are dominated by loud reactions. Negotiations are altered for months by strategic silence. Professional women's basketball is currently at a turning point. There is growth. Leverage has changed in a way that cannot be undone by messaging alone, but momentum is palpable. The league's ability to continue without a single player is not the question going ahead. The question is whether it can maintain this degree of accelerate if the player ever determines that using her leverage elsewhere would be more beneficial. The loudest moments are rarely remembered by history. It recalls the subtle ones that changed course. Additionally, this might be one of